Hello there, kia ora. I know we're all sitting at home at the moment practicing our shocked, not really faces at the news that a Destiny Church youth pastor who's not a drag queen is currently under investigation for sexual abuse allegations. But what I've got to ask your help on is something a little bit more time sensitive. You see, the government last week, under urgency, introduced a bill to repeal Maori wards in local body authorities because they felt it wasn't democratic that everybody didn't get to have a say on these things. So they want to rush this through. Part of that rushed process involves a 5-day only period for the public to make submissions, and that went out on Friday, meaning you've got till 11:59 p.m. on Wednesday night to get this in. And so I figured today I'd give you a few things that you can put into your submission if you want to make one. And if you want to see my submission, it's actually in my Facebook and Instagram pages at the moment. I'll pin them to the top so people can find them. You can see what it is that I've written, and the tips that I'm going to give you here are the same ones that are written there if you need like a hard copy of it. But there are some points that can be raised in opposition to this bill. It should also be pointed out that this bill for some reason is going through the Justice Select Committee, not through the Māori Affairs Select Committee. So they have a very different perspective on it. But I kind of figured it's because there's actually two members of this committee who already intimately understand why voters in local democracy wouldn't be so keen on being asked to choose something that had already been settled by their council. Anyway, let's jump onto these tips, okay? And you can use all of them. You could expand on one of them. It's entirely up to you. Your voice is the most important part of any submission. But let's start off with the most basic one. This is actually a breach of Article 2 of Te Tiriti o Waitangi, namely the right of Māori rangatiratanga, the self-determination rooted in tikanga as defined by the Human Rights Commission, asking for the wider public to determine if Māori specifically can have this right granted under the founding document is a breach of that right. You also have to point out that councils do not need to hold referenda on other ward structures like rural wards or community boards. For some reason, they have pinpointed specifically Māori wards. Not that that sounds racist in any shape, way, or form. There's the fact that councils are given delegated authority to make decisions for populations, and they set up current Māori wards going through various other processes, like they reach out for public submissions, they get feedback, they do a whole bunch of research with experts, they get advice from iwi and other kaupapa-based groups, as well as several rounds of council voting before anything's accepted. It's not like one person sits there going, you know what, today we're going to introduce Māori wards. It doesn't work that way. And the systems that are set up in place to do those other kind of reach outs happen for all sorts of other reasons. It's not being brought up by the government as a problem at all. You can also bring up that report that I followed last year, the one on the future for local government, He Piki Tūranga, He Piki Kotoku. It was really specific in mentioning the continuing need for Māori wards as a tool to ensure both the bare minimum of obligations in meeting te tiriti, but also in creating an environment where Māori feel like they have a stake in the process and outcomes. Because that was one of the big things that came through in the report. Declining numbers for voting is down to the fact that people don't feel they have any ownership in the outcomes or the results or the process. And this was a step towards that. You could also add in there things like the fact that the voting demographics in local elections are historically weighted towards property-owning older Pākehā, and that the lower voter turnout, it shows that a minority with a vested interest can have a disproportionate outcome on the results. Just look at Hamilton, for example. This can lead to voting decisions that are made that could be seen as not in the best interests of the population as a whole. You can also point out that forcing such a referendum is deliberately stoking racial division, and we've seen that with past referenda on the topic around the country. There are some really interesting examples in places like New Plymouth, where it was used to really seriously whip up some racial disharmony there, and it specifically targets Māori unfairly during the process. And finally, you can also point out that forcing extra expenditure on an election process when councils are looking at record rates increases is irresponsible and will impact those councils and the public's trust in them, as we've already seen with how councils are now dealing with things like the increased costs on the return water infrastructure that they now have to pay for, which the current government also did. Look, ultimately, this government promised to allow local government to do its job, and now it's stepping in going, no, we're going to dictate what you can do, but only around Māori wards specifically, and water. Anything to do with Māori that has any kind of dog whistle related to it, well, that seems to be the kind of thing that they rush through Parliament under urgency and give us 5 days to give feedback on. So, jump onto the Parliament website, parliament.nz. You can find the submission process there. It is super simple. Like I said before, you can check it out on my Facebook and Instagram page as well if you want to see the written version of what I've put in, as well as what these points and tips are. They might help you out. So yeah, if you've got a chance, step in, do that. You don't have to do an oral submission, but I will be, because this is kind of my passion area when it comes to politics. Get to writing. It's super easy. Get involved in that process, and let's tell this particular government to stop trying to dictate what anybody else can do when it comes to Māori, how Māori vote, how people vote, and the disinformation that gets spread up when they put this bullshit out in the world.